So now I will be formally introducing our next speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Joy Toney, a cybersecurity professional and advocate for ethical technology and community development. Joy brings more than 20 years of experience working across nonprofit, customer services, government contracting, and transportation sectors. She is currently a senior program consultant at AIM for Change, LLC, and holds multiple certifications, including CISSP, CCSP, and SHRM-CP. Ms. Joy is passionate about ensuring technology and serves both business and society. Her talk, The Price for Progress, Ethical Cybersecurity and Tech-Driven Communities, explores how cities courting big tech must also address risk to the public systems like water, energy, and waste. Using real-world case studies, Joy will share how ethical frameworks and cybersecurity go hand in hand in building sustainable communities. Please join me in welcoming Joy Toney.
Thank you. Thank you, Sydney. I appreciate that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I know this is like lunchtime, so if you feel hungry and you want to get something to eat and come back in, feel free to do that. But I'll go ahead and get started on the talk. So she already gave my brief introduction, but I have a lot of other acronyms behind my name. I won't go into all of them, but if you have questions, you can ask me about them later. I really wanted to dive in because we have a lot of material to cover, and I know I have like an hour, but you'll probably have some questions or some reflections after I cover some of the content. So what are some of the typical AI risks that you have? Well, of course, you've got risks to your organizational assets, right? The things that we're trying to protect, whether those are the systems themselves, the data that we house on behalf of our constituents, our customers, our clients. We want to make sure that we maintain privacy over that data and keep it safe and secure. But AI could pose a risk to that if it has certain permissions and we're not monitoring those as humans. We might have risks to our organizational operations if we have a lack of reliability of the AI systems or a lack of availability for the AI systems because they've been, subject to some attacks that we haven't secured against. We need to make sure that we don't have those service failures impact our customers or constituents negatively and our operations still continue. We've got risks to our consumers and users. You may have harmful outputs from that AI that's generated, that output from the model itself. It might have been subject to some type of poisoning attack, with that data and give bad outputs, or it could have been trained improperly to generate harm to the customers that use that data. So we want to make sure that we prevent that and the harmful outputs of outcomes or decisions from the AI system, or make sure it doesn't present false information. And then, of course, you've got the unintended consequences and maybe some liability issues as well, resulting from any agentic actions from any AI systems that you've deemed to go out and be in your organization, manage other systems, services, or processes, and those agents are autonomous, but maybe they haven't had the right programming or logic put in place to secure those actions and actually protect the consumer and user data. So lots of things, but there's a hot link in this presentation, and Sydney will make sure that the slides are available for the attendees. If you want to go to OWASP, they do have a generative AI handout for incident responses you can look at to look at those harms and determine how you can handle and troubleshoot those. Another organization that has standards for AI systems is, of course, the ISO, which is an international standards organization. So you can look at that as well to try to promote ethical and transparent processes with your AI systems and make sure those systems are accountable and transparent and fair. That probably will cost you about 200 euros if you wanted to download that standards document. However, if you want to get the current NIST AI risk management framework and the accompanying secure software development practices for generative AI, you can get that free from download from NIST. Doesn't cost you anything but your time to look it up and get it on the site. But either way, all of those practices from those handouts will help you secure your AI systems for your organizations. So that's a little bit about like the security side of it, but let's talk a little bit more about ethics and reputation. And what does that mean to the impact of your customers and constituents? So as you saw maybe on the earlier slide and as part of the introduction that Sydney gave me, I'm a member of ISC2. I hold 2 certifications from them. One is a CISSP, which is a Certified Information Security Systems Professional, and the other one is the CCSP, which is a Cloud Security Professional. So as part of holding those certifications, ISC2 has you hold up their ethical canons that you agree to once you get those certifications and become a member. So these are the 4 canons that I'm listed here. I don't know if you can see them that well, but I'll just read them just in case you can. Protect society, the common good, necessary public trust, and confidence in infrastructure. Act honorably, justly, honestly, responsibly, and legally. Provide diligent and competent service to principals. Advance and protect the profession. So 2 times the word protect is mentioned in these canons. Then you also have the thing where it talks about protect society, which when we normally think about our job description, we're not thinking about society. We're thinking about the organization that gives us our paycheck, you know, that 9 to 5 that we serve. But here they're stressing that they want us to make sure as professionals in cyber to protect society, the common good, the necessary public trust. And I think a lot of times we kind of forget about that and put that on the back burner when we do our jobs out in corporate or freelance, if that's what you do. So it's beyond the 4 walls of your organization. So what does it mean to protect? And I just went back to the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition. Protect means to cover or to shield from exposure, injury, damage, or destruction, to maintain the status of or integrity of. And so that's really broad, right? We want to protect society, the common good, and the infrastructure. So what do? We want to shield that from exposure, injury, damage, and destruction, and maintain the status of or the integrity of whatever we're protecting. So again, that's really broader than the 4 walls that we serve in our 9 to 5 job at our organizations. So here is the introduction into big tech, into this discussion, which is why I wanted to kind of cover this topic. So a lot of times you see cities courting these large companies to come and invest in our city, you know, make sure that we'll give you the resources that you need to build up your company's infrastructure. And then in turn, you'll invest in our communities by giving us jobs, you know, boosting our economy, that sort of thing, right? You know, bringing some notoriety to whatever the city is. And so some of the case studies I'm going to go over will cover like Microsoft, Google, XAI, et cetera. But I just wanted to sort of put the wrapper around there that, you know, big tech comes in, but they start consuming and impacting the resources that the communities have access to. So we'll go into that a little bit more. You probably can't see this really well, it's a little small here, but basically this is just talking about how much energy consumption the data centers use, especially AI data centers use, relatively speaking to just the general population that exists. So in the one chart that's on the left, it's really talking about the amount of electricity that the data centers use collectively. It would be like the same as the country of France in its whole population. And so this study was done back in 2023, and this was a projection for 2030. But because this was done in 2023 and AI has exponentially grown, this study is a little outdated and this projection is lagging behind. So it's actually further along in its energy consumption than what's shown here on this graph. The next thing on this graph would be energy consumption as well. It's just a different way of looking at it, not talking about it in terms of country usage. But the other thing that I thought was interesting was the one that's on the right to the lower of the corner is the energy consumption for a Google search, which, you know, everybody used to do Google searches before you started doing ChatGPT searches and having those conversations. So the Google search is the little green bar, the little tiny green bar that's got like 1 unit. Comparatively speaking to the red bar, which has 10 units, and that's the ChatGPT usage of energy. So it's actually a 10x usage for doing a ChatGPT conversation as opposed to just a regular Google search. Now, you multiply that times the millions and millions of users doing generative AI searches compared to simple Google searches, and that's your amount of energy consumption. But we don't normally see that as users. We just get that instantaneous response in those back and forth conversations, and that's all we're concerned about. But the energy costs someone something somewhere. And then if you have a situation where humans are competing for energy versus AI, then you might have a concern. So this is just a little quick fact here talking about generative AI systems need enormous amounts of fresh water to to cool their processors and generate electricity. And so one study was saying that the demand for water for AI could be half that of the United Kingdom by 2027. But again, this was back at the end of 2024. So that estimate was probably more on the conservative side. And my guess is that's going to exponentially grow. And this is just more statistical facts about the intensified use of water by AI and its usage of fresh water, considering that we have a limited amount of fresh water on the planet. 3% of that fresh water is locked in glaciers. Much of it's locked in glaciers, but AI structure is putting a strain on that limited resource. So the UN is predicting that by 2030, which is just less than 5 years away, that half of the global population will face a severe water crisis because of that. Let's go into case studies. So does anybody recognize what this picture is on the top? You're probably more familiar about the picture on the bottom. So this is the Colorado River at the top. And if you can see like the little sandy white part, that is the decrease in the water level of the Colorado River. So they've been shrinking in their water levels that are available in the groundwater as well as the river levels. This has impacted a lot of the residents in the area where they have more limited water. And so they have kind of a water crisis in Arizona because of that. This picture here is just representative of a data center. So you can see like all the servers and hubs and switches and all that kind of stuff in there. So Arizona, to address their crisis, they need to increase the use of water regulation and investment in sustainable practices like water recycling. It's also impacting their other industries like agriculture, not just technology. So you've got Intel, TSMC, Google also consuming Arizona's limited water supply. Google's using about 4 million gallons of water per day, which is roughly about 27,000 residents. TMSC has expanded in Phoenix with facilities that have a massive demand for their water volume to manufacture chips and cool their data centers and production. But the wells are sort of drying up. And if the leaders in those areas those communities continue to treat water as just the cost of doing business with big tech companies and manufacturing, then they're going to find themselves where the markets are thriving for that tech, but the people who live in the communities are not thriving at all. And so some of the things that they kind of joked about in an article that was reported on this was, well, are they going to just, truck in fresh water? So give everybody like fresh water bottles and bring that in. But people still need to have running fresh water in their homes. And then it's like, well, do they want to try to divert water and get it from the Mississippi since the Colorado River is drying up? And that's not a sustainable approach either, because there are other states that are competing for the Mississippi River water as well. Tennessee and Mississippi, of course, are ones that are in that number. Build plants in Mexico for that. And well, considering the current economic trade agreements that are going on with our neighbors in the South, not just the North and et cetera, I don't know if that's really a sustainable plan either. We'll see in the next, 2 weeks or so what that turns out to be, since there are more tariff conversations that are on the table. And then, I guess ultimately at the end of the day, the clock is ticking, right? They have to figure out some sustainable investment for their water. Policies like with water recycling, water reharvesting, water restoration. And water is very essential, as you know, to human life. We cannot live without fresh water. We have to have that in order to maintain our lives. So those are choices that the localities need to make. On a promising front, Microsoft had announced that they were innovating their data centers to closed loop cooling systems that recycle water. And so that effectively cuts the water consumption to zero and makes that they decided to make that their primary water cooling method across their data centers. And so I think that's a really healthy example for technology companies to leverage when they're implementing these technologies in their own ecosystems. And then that way that doesn't have a negative impact on the community in which they're housed in. Cyrus One also doesn't use water for cooling. They have just a negligible amount of only 180,000 gallons a year for humidification. So all of their new data centers from 2024 onward use zero water cooling. So those are pretty cool things that tech is doing. Another interesting case study from Iron Mountain in Boyers, Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but this is a data center in the background, but it's kind of built into the ground infrastructure. If you can kind of see like that wall, it's actually in a cave. So what they did was they built that data center 200 feet underground. And so that naturally makes it a cool environment so that it won't get overheated. But in order to make sure that it does actually stay cool in the data center, they also get water from an underground lake that's there. And with that lake, they take the water out of the lake, they push it through a filtration system and pump that water through the heat exchanger where that water cools any of the components in that closed loop system, and then it circulates amongst the servers, keeps it cool. Then they filter the water back to go back into the lake. So it's like a net zero type of exchange for that system, so that the community in Boyers is not negatively impacted by what's going on with that data center, at least from a water perspective. But I also thought that was a good solution to that because, you know, it doesn't take away from the community source of fresh water. That water is still maintained. They were actually, Iron Mountain was actually the first, their site was actually the first underground facility to receive an Energy Star certification, and those are not very easy to get, so kudos to them for doing that. And they thought about, with their teams, about the local characteristics in which they wanted to build the data center, but also thought about the requirements for the data center itself and made sure that the community in their design could cooperate and live sustainably and have a mutual benefit. So they took that thinking and actually thought about it very deeply and built that data center. And they actually kind of helped add to the security by design too, because it was built underground. So you have more limited personnel coming into that data center. You know, you have, first of all, you have fewer people that's aware of it because you don't see it. You know, it's not out in the open. And then the people who do know it's there, it's underground, so they have more restricted and limited access. So I thought that was also a nice touch for security by design with this case study. Okay, so now we're going to talk about XAI a little bit. And I know they've been in the news somewhat, but their CEO has been in the news more than anything else. So I'm not going to talk about that in a political way. I'm just going to say what the impact has been on the facility that's been built in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where I'm from. So here, I don't know if you can really tell in this picture, it's kind of gray, but it's an infrared kind of image. And the little red dots on this picture are gas turbines that are around the actual data center. So they're around the facility, okay? And there were a total of like 32 or 35 of them. And the data centers that XAI has started building, because this was the first one, they built the second property that was like down the street, and then they decided to build a third one that was across the state line. So they got 2 in Memphis, Tennessee, and then 1 in like South Haven, Mississippi. And so according to the senior attorney at one of the legal advocate firms in Memphis said that data centers are a highly competitive space, and other companies are watching what XAI does, and that's true. They are watching. And right now what XAI is doing is essentially running a power plant without a permit. That's the additional gas turbines in addition to the electricity that they're getting from the local utility, Memphis Gas, Light, and Water. And that additional usage of the gas turbines has caused a real risk of harming people's health. So I do have a video here that I'd like for you to listen to. Actually, do presentation mode.
Flipping the switch to give Elon Musk's supercomputer right to remember more power. TVA board meets tomorrow to consider xAI's request for 150 megawatts of electricity to run the world's largest so-called gigafactory of compute. Action News 5 Joyce Peterson joins us now live in studio with more details on this. Joyce?
Joe, the Tennessee Valley Authority is a federal agency that provides power to MLGW. Now, any request beyond 100 megawatts requires TVA approval. Tonight, environmental groups worry about the supercomputer's demand on the electrical grid, the aquifer, and on Memphians' health. Elon Musk, riding high from Donald Trump's election night victory, finds out Thursday if the TVA greenlights xAI's request for 150 megawatts of power to run the world's largest supercomputer in southwest Memphis.
I think Musk has increased his influence within the federal government.
Stephen Smith's group, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, in an op-ed piece Wednesday, urged TVA and Musk to take Memphis's environmental health seriously.
The problem is that Elon Musk is asking for this to be done at an extraordinary rapid rate with very little commitment to citizen and community engagement.
In July, multiple environmental groups, including Memphis Community Against Pollution, asked TVA to deny xAI's power request.
Due diligence as it pertains to the environmental aspect. How is this going to affect human life, and how is this going to affect our ecosystem?
150 megawatts is enough to power more than 100,000 homes. Critics worry about the electric grid and the aquifer, since computers need lots of water to stay cool. The gas turbine engines, another pollution concern for the predominantly black neighborhoods surrounding the building. The Southern Alliance for Clean Energy stating construction and other activities at Musk facility should be stopped until the community is given a voice, even though the group realizes that chances of that happening are slim to none.
He's, a billionaire. He's used to getting his way. He's used to sort of ramming things through, and he has the resources to do it.
So there are positives that come with the supercomputer, jobs, and Memphis making its mark as a tech leader. Musk's team also plans to build a gray water facility which turns wastewater into usable water to cool the computers. The TVA board meets at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We will keep you posted on air and online. Live in studio, I'm Joyce Peterson, Action News 5.
So when he built the facility, that was back in June of last year. So that was almost 1 year ago when he built the first one, where this community is located. The residents that are listed here on the pictures on the slide, they're from the little community that's like down the street from that data center. They're in a little sub area called Boxtown. And so what's happened since those gas turbines have been installed there in the xAI facility, the air has become more polluted for those residents because, the gas turbines just give off the exhaust and the air just kind of floats over, and then they get that exhaust in their community. And so I don't know if you can tell, but the lady with the red hair to the far left, she is holding up her inhaler because she's developed asthma since that center has been built with those gas turbines. She may have some underlying health issues anyway, but she's one of the residents, and there's many of them in that area who've developed respiratory issues since that facility has been built with those gas turbines. The other neighbors are out there. They're also sort of silently protesting. They were talking to news reporters and such about their concerns in their community based off of the exhaust from the turbines as well. And then somebody held up their own handmade sign, in protest about that too. So it's not just, they came in and gave a few people some jobs and, they're generating interest, for xAI in Memphis and giving Memphis kind of like a little spot on the tech map. But this is a community in Memphis that's been directly impacted by what they've been doing. And this is a follow-up news story.
Big changes are happening in One Memphis neighborhood. Whitehaven is welcoming an XAI data center to the area.
However, not everyone is on board with the company's plan to expand their footprint in Memphis. WRG's Tia McKenzie is live with what the community is saying tonight. Tia, what you hear?
That's right, Greg and Stephanie. Now, this new data center is causing some commotion among some of the residents. They say that water pollution and poor air quality are a couple of their concerns. Will XAI be a bright spot for businesses or a terrible take for taxpayers?
All of us need to come together, as a unit and as a community and stop this.
Those behind the project are emphasizing technological advances, but some residents are not buying in.
When a project this size comes into any city, there's supposed to be public notice, and none of that was given from the state, local, and federal level. TVA is federal. People need to remember that. TVA is federal. Elon Musk is Doge. That's federal. Direct conflict of interest.
The Greater Memphis Chamber announced the nearly $80 billion project Friday. Located in the 5400 block of Tulane Road, the site sits right down the street from an elementary school.
I'm concerned a whole lot because I have family in this community and I don't want my child to get bad water, nothing to happen to my kids. No. I got grandkids.
MLGW says XAI requested a system impact study for 260 megawatts, and any request over 5 megawatts must be reviewed by the Tennessee Valley Authority. XAI also requested gas from MLGW. MLGW would not say how long the study would take.
I wanted to let the people know that there's going to be a meeting on the 17th and the 18th at the county commission. They are over the Shelby County Health Department, and they are the ones that have the ability to deny the permit to XAI with the environmental hazard that they're going to do to our community. So we're asking everybody from the community. Boxtown is USA is leading this.
With no wastewater infrastructure nearby, questions remain as to who will supply water to keep processors at the facility cool. Now, MLGW did not say what the requirements would be if this proposal were to be approved. We reached out to TVA for comment. We're waiting to hear back. Reporting for your news leader in downtown Memphis, Tia McKenzie, WRAG News Channel 3.
And we'll be keeping close watch on that commission meeting as well. Tia, thanks.
So kind of as a follow-up to that, they did apply for permits for the gas turbines. That ended up getting, I think, approved by the council. However, there was still a lawsuit filed by the NAACP, which is the National Association for Colored Peoples, because of the violations of the Clean Air Act with those turbines. That lawsuit is still active, so it hasn't been withdrawn. However, XAI has just recently purchased, as of I think last week, a facility in South Haven, Mississippi, which again is right across the state line, so that they can generate more of their own power and pipe and install lines to pipe that energy from Mississippi over to their XAI facility in Memphis. So it's really interesting how some of that is getting kind of worked around from a consumption perspective. However, from a community sort of reputation perspective, one thing that they have done to kind of quell community anger, which doesn't really address the Boxtown residents' concerns. However, just from a city of Memphis concern, they have offered to pay for certain upgrades to Memphis City, Shelby County schools. So there's some infrastructure upgrades to some of the school buildings that they said that they would foot the bill for and cover. So I think they're trying to buy community goodwill in that respect, but that still doesn't address some of the harms that have been created environmentally from the facility that they built. So just kind of interesting to see how that sort of plays into the politics of the community. But again, this is an ongoing thing. They're still building. There's still, like I said, the active lawsuit. And so more of this will just roll out in the news to come over the next few months. Some of the things that were kind of talked about, just at a high level from the different community town halls and such, if they wanted to operate in Memphis, they should follow those rules that have been issued by the council and the other ordinances for the city. Applying for those permits was one thing, and then the officials would allow a certain number of permits for those turbine emissions that they require to make sure they have those kind of controls on pollution to protect the communities. The city and county officials could also push for the facility to power with cleaner technology. But again, I think they've kind of worked around that a little bit with getting that electricity facility across the state line. So that's something that's in the works for them. Isn't officially up and running yet, but they've made the purchase to the property. And then also XAI probably should be better neighbors to the community that they're actually having those facility in, such as Foxtown, so that they can meet with those community members on a regular basis to hear their voice and concerns and address those more proactively, I would think, instead of having things like this become news articles and news time. And that way they can address those concerns proactively on the community's air and their health. So what is finding the balance in all of this? I'm recommending, for companies to take this kind of approach to AI with a coexistence in mind, to coexist sustainably with the communities in which those facilities are housed. So if you have a position at an organization where you can talk to your leadership or your executives and give voice to those type of community concerns as a person who lives in those areas, leverage your seat at the table and guide the business decisions proactively. Build in a community feedback loop for those decisions. Consider those natural solutions when you build data centers or any type of, technology component that way. And right-size AI for the business needs to avoid any overconsumption because you don't want to go too far with AI to where it consumes all the energy and all the water when it doesn't necessarily have to do that. And you want to consider sustainability if you have AI vendors that you're using in your own solutions. So who's doing a good job of being a good neighbor, and you want to make sure you partner with them over other vendors that aren't. And also track the emissions of your AI programs, so you know how much harm it may be causing to your environment. And this is just something that's taken from President Brad Smith over at Microsoft. It's kind of like leading by example in the industry. He says that Microsoft is taking responsibility for their own water use and developing technology to help others do the same. And so that was part of their goal to be carbon neutral by 2030, taking that pledge, and they're trying to pursue that with their other water replenishment projects. But it might be a little bit tough as, everybody's really ramped up on AI and the consumption has exponentially gone beyond people's expectations with that, but at least they're making strides to try to do it. Also, there is a standards group by IEEE that's meeting to develop a standard to measure AI environmental impact. So if you would like to become part of that group, there's a hot link on the presentation for you to join that working group. So I don't know, I don't really see many people who might get what this is. Does anybody know what this is? Okay, so we got a few people that know what this is. So Captain Planet, back in the 90s, was a thing, like a little superhero comic that became like a cartoon. But basically, he was like the hero for sustainability on planet Earth. And the bad guys were the people who were polluting, the Earth's resources, whether it was air pollution, whether it was water pollution, whether it was oil spills and stuff like that. So this is what this poster is supposed to remind us of. But one of the slogans in Captain Planet was that the power is yours. So I'm just trying to emphasize that we all have a part and a role to play, and that we can make our voice heard and help guide the solutions to do the right thing. So here are some tips from an AI governance standpoint, making sure you inventory all of your AI components and systems, identifying and managing those AI risks, establishing policies, roles, and procedures in AI governance, leveraging cross-functional committees in your organization so you can get as many voices to the table as possible to make the best decisions and have the best outcomes. Continuously evaluate and improve your AI's performance, document all those decisions, develop your incident response plans, like going back to the OWASP guidance on that, making sure that a human is in the loop so it can shut down the AI if things go awry, and leveraging the organizational and community feedback loops, very important. From a project standpoint, because you just might not have AIs that are just governing in your everyday systems, but you might be building specific AI projects, you want to make sure you identify those stakeholders involved, define the business cases for that AI usage, get a cost-benefit analysis on that and make sure it's the right thing to do, elicit and document those requirements, and make sure you have a communication plan for your stakeholders, create that training and awareness for the AI solution, and collaborate with your operations team on support for that before you implement it in production. So my key takeaways for everyone here today is just be your organization's conscience regarding AI, whether that's going to be your physical infrastructure and how you deal with that, or if you're going to have like systems that you develop, you want those to be developed responsibly. So you want to be fair and equitable, you know, transparent, things like that. You want to avoid inflicting harm when you're implementing any AI system or technology. Contribute to your organization's governance on your AI structure. Use an acceptable risk framework like the ones mentioned earlier in the presentation, and just keep abreast of all the evolving landscape changes. You know, make sure you watch what's happening out there, what they're posting on the different technology sites about AI, any incidences that might be resulting from that. You know, watch the news just to kind of see what's going on, but keep abreast. So my question here, oh, there's a song. Forgot I put that in the presentation. Y'all know who this artist is? It's Michael Jackson.
Gonna make it right.
So I'm asking you, are you going to make a change? Are you going to make a difference? But thank you for your time today. Just wanted to give you something to think about. So I appreciate it. Are there any questions? No question. Yes, sir. Oh, he feels sorry for me. I like you, last speaker.
So let me get this straight. They're using fresh water just to cool down the systems. Usually when you see a Walmart store, a big box store, or what have you, they have a pond or something out there. And I guess they're circulating water. They're not doing that type of thing.
So in the first news article that I aired, they were in discussions about using a water recycle system to cool the servers at XAI. And this is the XAI, I'm assuming you're talking about them, not somebody else, okay? So they were in discussions about doing that. But Memphis is known for a few things. Memphis is known for, anybody can guess like what's the number one Memphis thing is known for? And I'm not talking about violence, I'm talking about like positive stuff. So number one thing that Memphis is known for is barbecue, right? But like the second thing Memphis is known for is the water. And Memphis has an aquifer that's underground that has like very pure water. So like all they have to do is just extract the water from underground and just send it out through the utility system, because it really doesn't need any extra like filtration enhancement or whatever. So what XAI has been doing, even though they haven't gotten this water like a recycle system up yet, because that's still like in progress, but they're really not focused on that because they were in such a hurry to get the facility up. They just went and tapped into the fresh water. And so they're draining the water in the aquifer that residents need to drink in the Memphis area and using that to cool the systems. So again, it's kind of a touchy situation because the city council, the economic Development Commission wanted to make sure that they provided and accommodated the tech company with, well, you can use this resource, you can use that resource. They also gave them like a lot of tax discounts too. So they got like a ton of tax credits. But in lieu of getting the recognition and also providing some jobs, that's the exchange that they made. So right now, there's still some battleground, I guess you'd say, with the community organizations that are represented, as well as with Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, and also the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, what they talked about the usage that's going on. But it's a lot of politics because you got down to like the city level and the government and the Economic Commission's trying to work it out with them. But the residents are the ones that are kind of holding the bag, so to speak. So, but it's all in progress.
Questions on
Okay.
the gas. Is there any concern for the gas supply, for all the gas that they're going to be using? That's one. Number two, how much positive impact of jobs has this provided for the immediate community around?
Oh, I can tell you that the job lift is not that much. It's like less than 100 positions. I mean, a lot of those people too weren't hired locally. They were relocated. So I would say probably about like half of the staff was probably relocated from other areas around the United States to come and live in Memphis, not the ones that were local people already who, probably were qualified and had tech. Because, Memphis has like some pretty good universities. They have the University of Memphis. They've got Christian Brothers University. They've got Rhodes College. And, there are other universities around in the area where you've got qualified tech people that could work in data centers, but they just chose not to hire those people. And then the people that they could hire in the locality, they were only offering like a paycheck of maybe 60K to 70K for those people. So I can't say that it's really competitive in the tech market. But the second question was what now? That was on the gas, right? Okay, so for the gas supply, again, I'm going to go back to, I remember I told you like last year they did the first facility that was near Boxtown. Then down the street from that, they bought another facility and started building on it for their second data center. Then the third one they acquired across the state line in South Haven, Mississippi. So they just recently bought, like as of like last week or maybe the week before, they bought a power facility in northern Mississippi so they can get that electricity and start diverting it to the data centers in Memphis across the state line. So then at that point, once they divert it, then they're not going to have the gas turbines anymore. They're just going to use the extra electricity they pipe through. So again, it's kind of like a workaround for them on that, but we'll see what kind of happens. Yes, ma'am.
How can people that don't know that much about politics get involved and make a difference when it comes to environment and
So I would say there's probably a couple different venues, but to me, this wasn't necessarily a political discussion that needed to happen first. It could have been like an internal discussion that happened and then meeting with the community leaders secondly. So like with the type of people that are in XAI, they probably don't question the leadership at the top or give their opinions to leadership at the top. But if you're at an organization where you have a voice like that, I'm sure you could try to exercise your voice to voice those concerns and to help give guidance. If you get kind of shut down, then I would say like the secondary thing would be if there's a community group like the NAACP, it only picked this up because of a local advocacy group, which I think is the SELC, that piped it to them. And so people started getting involved with not just the community people, but people who wanted to help with the advocacy group to address these concerns and then show here's what we can do. We're willing to work with you on this, right? I mean, because they were willing to work with them and provide like alternatives and recommendations and things like that. But it's just that our company is willing to come to the table and have those types of discussions. So if you have the openness in your organization to reach out to the community, if you don't have an outlet already, like an advocacy group, then maybe you could start an advocacy group. I don't know, but it just kind of depends on what your situation is like at your organization. But I only bring this up because I think as part of the profession, that's part of our job is to help advance that. And if you see something, then maybe you could say something, in that regard, right? Because it's not just only cyber attackers that are coming at the organization, but sometimes we're our own worst enemies, right? Our organizations are doing harm too, so we need to hold them accountable and say, hey, we're part of this community. We also need to help protect it. And that's all I'm saying. So just do what you can. I know you might not be able to change the world, but you can do like little things, and that can have such a big impact. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate it. Go eat. I know you're hungry, and don't get hangry.
Thank you.